Good morning, everyone. Okay, the plan for the day is I will highlight two projects which were done in my home university. One is an undergraduate project, and the second is a graduate project. And then we will ask the teams to present their proposal, the project proposal, and then if we have some time left, then I'll present the third project too. Okay? So I've got a couple of projects which I have put together, and we'll see how time flies. I want to give enough time to the teams to present their proposals as well. All right? Geared towards bringing the cost down. A responsive supply chain is something which is agile. You know, you're meeting the demands on a fast basis. So he came up with a matching between a product and a supply chain, saying for a functional product you should be having an efficient supply chain, and for an innovative product you should be having a responsive supply chain. Okay? So if you have a functional product and you have a responsive supply chain, it's a mismatch. If you have an innovative product and you have an efficient supply chain, it is a mismatch. Okay? So now I want you to think about this. If I am in this cell, northeast cell, which is in the mismatch, what can I do to get out of that mismatch? If I am in the northeast cell, what can I do to get out of it? And the next one, if I'm in the southwest cell, what can I do to get out of it? So obviously a mismatch. What are if I am a firm in northeast cell, what are the strategies that I can deploy to get out of that mismatch? Think about it. The product is efficient. You make the product efficient, but no, the product is not efficient. The efficiency is related to the supply chain. Okay? So what can I do? Very simple. That's the beauty of the 2x2s. I can go down. If I am going down, what is happening? I am trying to make the product much more differentiated. Right? I am in a cell which is like a functional commodity type. When I am going down, I am making the product much more differentiated. Right? Put more, new product development, innovation and all that. The other choice I can do is I can go to the left, which is the exact opposite of what I said just now, which is to strip it of the basic frills, basic bones product, in which case I am fine with, I don't need a responsive supply chain, I have an efficient supply chain, and the product itself is a commodity type. Okay? The same thing is true for an innovative product. I have two choices. I can go up or I can go to the right. Each transition going up or going to the right will entail doing something to the product or to the supply chain. Okay? So if you are in the wrong cell of being an efficient supply chain, then you have to think about the differentiation in terms of a supply chain, making it much more responsive. Okay? So that's what she did over here. So the beauty of this particular article is that it gives you all the measurement of what constitutes a functional and innovative supply chain. One point on this as well is that when you look at functional and innovative products, they are not dichotomous. They are not either or, but they are in a continuum. The same thing for a supply chain. They are also in a continuum from efficient supply chain and responsive supply chain. So what he says is that there are two purposes for a supply chain: to be physically efficient or to do market mediation. Market mediation is market responsive. Okay? The same thing, there are two types of products, which is functional or innovative. So let's start looking at, maybe we'll look at it from the raw point of view. Okay? So if I were to look at whether a product is functional or innovative, I look at demand. Commodity type products are highly predictable in demand. So this for apparel, it's a functional product, it's highly predictable. The product life cycle tends to be for basic apparel more than 2 years. Contribution margins are very low because there's intense competition, and the average stock out rate is 1 to 2%. Okay, so that's why we have all of these in the apparel column. On the innovative part of it, there can be innovative products in apparel. They are the fashion or the fad apparels. They have shorter lead times. The product variety is very, very high, and so that separates the functional and the innovative product. If we move to conflict minerals, the aspect of demand is fairly predictable, long life cycle, right? And contribution margin is very high because of very few sources. Okay, to do that. Product variety tends to be very low, and average stock out rate is 1 to 2%. So that's the comparison between functional and innovative. Now look at the supply chain. When you look at the supply chain for apparel, the primary purpose is to supply predictable demand at lowest possible cost. Okay, but for the conflict mineral, it's also to supply predictable demand at the lowest possible cost. In these two comparisons, they are the same. Manufacturing focus is to have high utilization rate. The same is true for the mines. Inventory strategy is to have high turnovers and minimum inventories. And for conflict minerals, especially some of the innovative products like gold and so on, they have to have significant buffer stock. Okay, the lead time focus is to try to shorten the lead time as long as it does not increase the cost. And the same thing is true for the conflict minerals as well. How do you do your supplier selection? For functional product, apparel, primarily on cost and quality. And for innovative products, it is based on what I said is responsiveness, which is speed, flexibility, and quality. Product design is to maximize performance and minimize the cost, right? This is a very good way to compare products and the supply chain to see how they match up. Okay, so the recommendation is when we are coming to the ethics in the CSR part. The main stakeholder is the buyer, so we have to establish a code of conduct. Audits are conducted to ensure that suppliers are enforcing these code of conduct conditions, and programs to encourage and help suppliers improve their labor conditions. As an update to this was done before the Bangladesh fires, multiple fires, and you know what happened over there in the textile industry, loss of life, safety standards were compromised and so on. So you do this through supplier scorecard and focus on compliance with code of conduct. I had shared with you the Walmart code of conduct, similar to that. Okay, there's another stakeholder which is external to the company called the International Trade Organizations. They are looking at labor standards uniform, like ISO, labor standards which are uniform for developing countries, exporters. Now in the conflict minerals industry, the stakeholder buyer, there's a corporate social responsibility for the consumers and the electronic industry not to use conflict minerals. Okay, it's not illegal to use conflict minerals, but not to use conflict minerals coming clearly from mines which have abused human rights and all that kind of violations. Process and strategy for supply chain traceability. So like the Hayward lumber case that we saw in the course, where we looked at chain of custody. This is very important and almost very difficult to do as well, because the data is just not there in countries like Africa. Reports detailing how it traces its supply chain, supplier compliance with the company's requirements for conflict-free minerals, audits for that, and supplier certification program. So the supplier scorecard should focus on the supplier's mineral sourcing process, audit score, and evaluation of the certification program. So before we go to the project 2, do you have any questions on this one? Okay, this was an example of an honest undergraduate thesis. I want to now give you an example of a graduate product. We had talked a little bit about this, the fair trade supply chain, which the Starbucks enforced. So this is a context of Starbucks in Ethiopia. And the issue again is about ethical sourcing strategy implemented by Starbucks for coffee. As in many agricultural supply chains, the growers, the farmers were not getting a bigger piece of the pie in terms of profit. So this is a program directed towards changing that. And Ethiopia, you'll see the reason why they picked Ethiopia and why Starbucks, because it was a leading mover into this fair trade coffee movement. Okay, so we'll get to know about the company, we'll get to know about Ethiopia. I'll tell you a little bit about coffee as a commodity. How many of you here like coffee? You probably start the day with coffee, right? And you'll get to see, have you heard of Ethiopian coffee? It's a little bit more on the dark roast side, you know. Starbucks, you've probably gone and had coffee in Starbucks, in Chennai maybe. There's nothing here, right? Nothing close to Dindigul or anything. Madurai maybe, no? We don't know. Okay, but definitely in Chennai, okay? And nowadays you see it very popular in the malls as well, right? It's very popular to have a Starbucks in the mall. Coffee is a commodity as it affects the global supply chain. What is the supply system and the ethical responsibility and the future recommendations. All right, so Starbucks is a very interesting company. They are headquartered in Seattle, Washington, and the CEO and chairman is Howard Schultz, the CEO for a very long time. They operate 20,891 stores in 62 countries. In 2011, they employed over 149,000 people. Its revenue is $13.29 billion, and its operating income is about $2 billion. So it was founded by these three guys who met at a university, and in 1987, they sold it to the current CEO and chairman. Okay. Now, how do you build a business around coffee? Now, before 1987, did people drink coffee? They didn't drink coffee? They had. For generations, we've been drinking coffee, right? So how do you think of an entrepreneurship idea of creating a business, you know, billion-dollar business about coffee? So it's not about the coffee alone, is it? What does Starbucks give you beyond the coffee? It's the ambience, it's the atmosphere, right? It's the cool effect, because most of the youth like to go there and hang out and have conversations and things of that nature. Businesses get conducted over there. People, there are Starbucks places where you have small study rooms where people conduct business or do their study things and all that, right? They don't make you just drink the coffee and go. They want you to stay and experience that. Then that's why you're paying a premium price for the coffee as well, right? You're paying, it doesn't come free, it comes with the fact that it's this we call as a augmented product. It's a product along with the service and the product offerings around that product, the tangible and the intangible. So in just 5 years, they grew from 6 stores to 140 stores, including being listed on the New York Stock Exchange. They really rode the wave in the 1980s and the 1990s in this niche segment in coffee called specialty coffee. Okay, this Ethiopian brand is one specialty coffee. Prior to that, we used to probably drink, you know, a regular version of coffee. Maybe have 3 or 4 brands of coffee that you have, like filtered coffee and, you know, instant coffee and all that, right? And of course, in Chennai, we are known, in this state, we are known for this process of making the coffee where we do juggling with it, right? To make this coffee cup and it will froth, right? You all remember that. And it is a big deal. You know, when I was growing up, you know, you see this local tea stall and coffee stall doing it a much better job. Now you go to the 5-star hotels, they're trying to do the same thing and charge you 10 times that money for a small coffee cup. So it's interesting how coffee can make you change your experience. Okay, they rode the wave on the specialty coffee thing. In terms of globalization, after Seattle, they just went across the border and opened the first store in Vancouver, British Columbia, and then in Chicago. First overseas store was in Tokyo, and then since then, they opened a coffee trading company in Switzerland, opened its first store in Lima, Peru, in South America, and now they have plans to, by now they must have already opened it, a store in Ho Chi Minh, Vietnam. Now let's talk about Ethiopia. Ethiopia is a country located in the Horn of Africa. The population is about 91 million. Total land size is about 426,000 square miles. GDP is $103.1 billion. Currency is the birr. In terms of PESTEL, politically unstable, unpredictable, 97th in the ease of doing business, 130th in the transparency corruption perception index. Economic development is relying heavily on donor countries. Ethiopia is a low-income country. Socially, they're much more tranquil than most of other African countries. because there's a positive culture between the Christians and the Muslims. High mortality rate caused by disease, which is probably true of many countries in Africa. Most of the highly educated people leave the country. By the way, we have a lot of Ethiopian cab drivers in the US. They come there, and and I used to make a mistake. Apparently, there is a difference between Eritrea and Ethiopia. I think they are supposed to be neighboring countries, and they don't seem to get along. So, if the guys from Ethiopia and you say, "Are you Eritrean?" they don't like it. It's like India and Pakistan. So, we have a little bit of a social struggle over there. Poor infrastructure in regards to roads and communication lines, and legal, trademarking and licensing implications are tough to enforce. From environment, global warming is causing beetles to thrive, and these insects are killing coffee plants. In the past, the main problem they used to have is drought. Now they have this problem with beetles as well. This is the coffee trade chain. It depends on whether it's a free market chain or a cooperative chain. It starts with the farmer, and then there is a collector or a supplier, then the exporter, buyer, and at the US we have the roaster plants, which is then sent to the retailer, and then you and I consume it. The only change between this and the cooperative movement is the collector and the supplier is actually a cooperative, and the exporter is actually a union of cooperative societies. Okay, and so there's a fair trade premium, so that the profit. This is what I was talking about, which Starbucks played a role in. A fair trade premium means the profit is shared back to the upstream participants in the supply chain leading up to the farmer. So the trade from Ethiopia is a little bit more complicated. It's easier to start from the bottom. So from the bottom you have the producers, which are the smallholder coffee farms. And then it goes to the cooperatives who do the drying, washing and depulping of the coffee seeds. Then it goes to the unions, cooperative unions, who are the exporters. From the unions, it goes to the national coffee market or the specialty coffee market, which when it comes to the US follows the rest of the stage, which is the roasters and retailers and the customers and so on. Okay? Let's talk about coffee. One of the most famous brands of coffee in Ethiopia is called Arabica coffee. And this Arabica coffee accounts for 80% of the world's coffee production. It's grown either in subtropical regions at high altitudes with a clear rainy and dry season, or in equatorial regions with medium altitudes which has frequent rainfall. Each tree can produce from 1 to 10 pounds of dried beans each year. This is called the bean belt, where all the coffee is grown. As you can see, it is grown in many parts of the globe, including India. Okay? And in terms of, I'll tell you the rankings of that in a minute. So it produces 390,000 metric tons of coffee. It's the world's 5th largest producer of coffee. About 25% of the population, that's about a quarter of them, depends on coffee. Exports about 50% of their coffee and accounts for 33% of total exports. This is the production process. You see how complicated it is. Next time you have a drink of coffee, you think of this. Okay? The seeds are planted. The trees reach maturity after 7 years. Berries are picked. The berries are peeled to expose the beans. The beans are left to ferment. Beans are washed and dried, and then they're sent to one of the 6 roaster plants in US for roasting, and then the coffee is processed. The production challenges, as we just talked about, that there are 900 insects known to be pests of the coffee tree. That's a lot, okay? With a third of those insects being beetles. And in recent years, global warming has led to rising temperatures, and this has led to an abundance of beetles in Africa. The price is interesting. The price of coffee is very volatile. It reached an all-time high of $7.50 per kg in '77, and all-time low of about $1 in 2001. Average price has been about $2.70 over the last 40 years. As you can see from this graph, that there's a lot of fluctuations in the wholesale price of coffee. In terms of supply-demand, there is an imbalance. Like, look, just 2 years apart. In 2011, 2012, there was a shortage of 2.7 million bags because both developing and developed countries started to demand that. But very next year, there was a surplus. of 5.3 million bags because the increase in production was higher than the increase in consumption. Even then, the prices were expected to still rise. Alternative uses of coffee is in health and beauty applications. The caffeine exfoliates your skin. It is used in cleaning. The grounds of the coffee is used as scrubbing agents. Odor eliminator, very strong aroma. That's why if you go to any coffee shop in the mall, you can smell Starbucks from about a mile away because there's a strong smell of that, right? Gardening, the coffee grounds keeps pests away. It also does soil enrichment also. Okay? Substitute, the primary substitute for coffee is tea, right? So tea, by the way, I have an interesting entrepreneurship idea. It's already been started in Noida, Delhi. So this ex-IITian who came up with a great idea that he copied Starbucks business model, except they don't serve coffee, but they serve tea. Okay? Like if Starbucks has 200 varieties of coffee, he personally product designed 200 varieties of tea. And Starbucks would start to sell their coffee with cookies and biscuits and all that. He used to sell, I'm sure he's got cookies and biscuits in his chain as well, but he sells samosas. So he's trying to mimic the Indian cultural alignment towards the Starbucks problem, and he had like 3 stores in Gurgaon doing huge business, okay? The costs are very comparable. Tea and coffee cost around the same, but it takes 7 grams to produce a cup of coffee, but only 2 grams to produce a cup of tea. Coffee is a commodity. Ethiopia is the largest coffee producer in Africa, the 5th in the world. It's the most important export item for the country. Half of the coffee is consumed in the country itself. And there's an elaborate, you see this even among some of the Middle Eastern tribes and so on, that the coffee ceremony is pretty elaborate. And it's a way of welcoming guests. Okay, in terms of production, it is centralized to 2 regions within the country, and there are 4 main production systems. It's the forest, semi-forest, garden, or plantation. It mostly comes from, as you saw in the producers, smallholder farmers. Production estimates have gone up. There's more planting of trees, but little progress on the pest control and input for the smallholders. Few commercial farmers are interested in investing in coffee because of the long lead times, 5 to 10 years to build a tree in peak production. Deforestation is also an issue. So in terms of consumption, there's a steady rise in the wholesale prices of coffee, currently $8, and it is expected that higher production costs will end up with higher ending stocks as well, and then it might reduce the local prices and lead to increasing domestic consumption. And what they were doing, when the prices go up, I don't know if you noticed that, if you see a slight change in the taste, it's because they're mixing barley with it, okay? So to expand the coffee and to maintain the profits. Another thing is a channel difference, that because, and this happens in India too, so roadside tea stall guy is probably not paying his taxes, and maybe, he's on a cash economy and all that, right? But if you have a shop in the mall, you're paying taxes. You're paying mall rent, you're paying taxes and all of that. So there is that thing, and there's of course a difference in price because you're not paying for the ambience and so on. They tend to be much cheaper, okay? There was a problem with the exports because the government suddenly said that you must ship the coffee in bulk rather than this 60 kg jute bags, and the operations were not able to ship in bulk. And they also objected because by putting it in jute bags, you're establishing the brand of the Ethiopian coffee. If it is in bulk, you lose that brand identity. So coffee is traded on a commodity exchange, right? And there's the government, so that's called the Ethiopian Commodity Exchange. The government has severe penalties for hoarding. So the exporters are not allowed more than 500 tons of coffee over the two-month time period. But this rule is exempt for ECX, cooperative unions, and local market wholesalers. Okay, and major issue of coffee in that country is storage capacity and investing in warehouses. So there are not too many policies about coffee in Ethiopia, and the government must try to impose regulations to maximize foreign exchange from that. And it's illegal to export coffee to domestic market. I have an same example in India. If you want to have the best mangoes over there, you probably have to go back to the US, and because they send the export mangoes there and they're of better taste. Same thing with dry fruits and almonds, right? The dry fruits and almonds in the Middle East are of a much richer quality. They're coming from here only, okay? If you go here to a local shop and buy this almonds, they don't taste just the same as if you go to the Middle East, because it's supposed to be the export quality, right? If you do the roasters, if you are going to be a roaster or an exporter or a domestic wholesaler, you should have a license. And to maintain the export quality, again there's a chain of custody over here. Export supply chain must be certified by the Ethiopian government to collect, store, transport, and process coffee. Chain of custody again. Okay, marketing. So the Ethiopian Commodity Exchange was primarily done to get farmers a chance to market their product. Now it handles 90% of the coffee exports, or 60% of the transactions are unwashed coffee. Farmers have benefited by having this commodity exchange. So now they have a market, they don't have to deal with middlemen. Okay? There are still complaints by producers and traders that some growers do not like to trade through the ECX. The commercial farms and coffee cooperatives, they benefit because they can get premium prices not only by brand, like organic, also by where it is grown, which territory. Okay? Now they are trying to work with Starbucks on a pilot project to identity preserve specialty coffee, both on organic versus the territory where it is being grown. Okay? So the global pricing ramifications of this is that there was a license agreement between all the key players in the supply chain with Europe, Japan, South Africa, and North America on coffee. So now what happens, so US retailers were getting $28 per kg, they were paying that much, while the farmers were only getting $1 for that. So you can see the steep indifference, and that's the reason the fair trade came into play. Okay? So in some of the high growing areas within the country, they were at least getting $4, and largely because of the license agreement, and they're estimating that it may go up to from $1 to $8 per kg. And not only that, not only the price, even the exports in terms of the sales are going to go from $400 million to about $1.6 billion, which is a pretty steep increase in the volume. We've been constantly saying Ethiopia is number 5. Who are the others? Brazil is still number 1, Vietnam, Indonesia, and Colombia. These are the key global suppliers of coffee. Please write this down. If you search, MIT offers a free GIS package, which basically takes for each commodity. It works, so just write down source map and MIT. If you Google it, you'll find it. This is like open source. What happens is it's like Linux, that if I decide, okay, coffee is already taken, somebody went and did the hard job of finding the source map. Where is it coming from, where is it reaching, and all that, right? And it covers number of commodities. So these maps, geographical maps, are already available to you. And if you find a commodity which is not there, let's say conflict mineral, which I think may be there, you can do the hard work and develop this map and upload it to the benefit of the community. Okay? So it's tracing the flows of goods in terms of the commodity. Okay, it's called the source map. This is the one for coffee. All right, the supply system in Ethiopia, 600,000 independent farmers, grown over 4 million small plots of land. Unlike many other countries, Ethiopia has cooperatives, which allows for farmers to have more influence on pricing rather than being controlled by landowners or large owners. Okay. Now let's talk about the sustainability strategy, and this is what we've been talking about, all this free trade, fair trade agreements and so on, right? So Starbucks came up with a program called CAFE, which is Starbucks Coffee and Farmer Equity. As you can see from the title, they want to spread more profits to the growers. Okay? So it created long-term sustainability growth in the supply chain, paying farmers fair prices, having fair terms, investing in social programs around the growing community that benefited the coffee producing communities, purchasing certified coffees, okay, and providing farmers access to affordable credit, a problem here in our country as well. All right. So they paired up with this NGO called Conservation International to create a coffee sourcing guidelines. And the criteria of these guidelines were along these 4 headings. So this scorecard has coffee quality, the prerequisite, so you have to meet that before you go on to the others. Economic accountability, environmental impacts, and social conditions. All these 4 add up to 100, and then you rank them in terms of preferred supplier, from the highest supplier to the lowest supplier, and so on. So the coffee and farm equity was done in conjunction with CI, created to extend the reach of the program, included third party, as we have seen in this course many times, third party verification as a requirement. And we talked about this 5 main categories: product quality, economic accountability, social responsibility, environmental leadership in coffee growing and in processing. They all have sub-indicators leading to about 28 indicators in total. So the third party verification of CAFE is done by this company called Scientific Certification Systems. Okay, and the senior vice president says that you're communicating to the stakeholders that this is important, and by getting an unattached, ambiguous third-party guide to verify this, it demonstrates a strong commitment to not only social responsibility but also to transparency and avoiding greenwashing and things of that nature. So what does this SCS involve? There's a supplier scorecard, there's a supplier application form, there's a self-evaluation form as well, and the terms and conditions document which lists the contractual terms. Okay? So moving forward, in 2011, only 86% of the coffee was ethically sourced, which met the CAFE guidelines. Within a year, it rose to 93%. Around 2015, which is already passed, they expect it to be 100% sourced for Starbucks. All right. So currently in Ethiopia, they're trying to expand the commodities system to improve food distribution systems as well. They want to make the crop contracts transparent. The regulated markets are encouraging the farmers to make more income in food and also other coffee crops and other food as well. And so it's stimulating, and this is I think even the guest speaker was talking about this, that this is the incidental side benefit you're getting by investing in the local community around the growing community. You get ancillary services which get improved, including the infrastructure. So they're seeing that the communication systems is going to improve and the road systems are also going to improve. So over and above and beyond what's going to happen is, what has already happened is the commitment to ethical sourcing. They've created farmer support center, resources like soil conditions, how to grow, weather patterns, so that they can lower their cost, environmentally responsible growing, better technology to improve the quality. In 2003, this is another example of Starbucks CSR. When the prices for Arabica were between 55 cents to 70 cents, they paid $1.20 per pound, which is significantly higher than that. Creating of agronomic center to improve farmer profitability. Now, this is a very interesting case study, by the way. Potatoes is a commodity, okay? So, there are brands of potatoes which are named after where it is being grown. The most important one is Idaho potatoes. So, if you go to a store in the US, you can find Idaho potatoes, okay? So, the Ethiopian, especially for Arabica, they said that we also need to have a brand, so that you should call our coffee not just as coffee, but Ethiopian coffee, okay, to brand that thing. And they won that thing. They honored that thing. So nowadays you'll have, so it helped them hugely in their brand appeal. So now you'll see in all the Starbucks and the stores that you'll have seeds which are called Ethiopian coffee, or you'll have ground coffee, which is Ethiopian coffee, okay. So it helped also in building capacity and so on. Now, there is still the same gaps. Look at it. If you look at the profit, only 10% goes to the Ethiopians, 90% goes to the foreign importers, distributors, and roasters, which is called the coffee war. So increasingly, they're trying to improve this so that more goes to the country and to the farmer, cascading effect. Little emphasis on the pest control, more work needed to work with climate change, and some of the CAFE compliance, the terms are not strictly compliant. So that is a serious issue with it. So in terms of the cave compliance, what is happening is, although there's a very small band which is non-compliant, the largest part of that has been verified, okay? And the preferred and the strategic part, preferred suppliers and strategic part is still something where they need to do work on. What can we do? Reward suppliers who get cave approval, give them bonuses, delegate commission to respond to global warming and its effect, shift further into fair trade, which is they already done, it's close to 100%, and initiatives to build infrastructure. So I think you know now more about coffee than you care to know. Okay, any questions on this? But you see similarities between all the CSR stuff we've been talking about, and the use of certification, supplier code of conducts, and ethical sourcing. It's happening in so many industries. Okay, so if people tell you, I know blood diamonds, you tell them, I know blood conflict minerals. All right. Okay. So how are we doing on time? Do you want to start off the first presentation now, or do you? Well, let's start with the first presentation. Okay, and then we'll take the break. Okay. Who wants to come? Who wants to do the first presentation?